Section 7 of Hans Christian Andersen, Fairy Tales and Short Stories, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Hans Christian Andersen, Fairy Tales and Short Stories, Volume 2, 1844 to 1847, by Hans Christian Andersen. Translated by H.P. Paul. The Snow Queen, Part 2. Third Story. The Flower Garden of the Woman Who Could Conjure. But how fared little Gerda during Kay's absence? What had become of him? No one knew, nor could anyone give the slightest information, excepting the boys, who said that he had tied his sledge to another very large one, which had driven through the street and out at the town gate. Nobody knew where it went. Many tears were shed for him, and little Gerda wept bitterly for a long time. She said she knew he must be dead, that he was drowned in the river which flowed close by the school. Oh, indeed, those long winter days were very dreary, but at last spring came, with warm sunshine. "Kay is dead and gone," said little Gerda. "I don't believe it," said the sunshine. "He is dead and gone," she said to the sparrows. "We don't believe it," they replied, and at last little Gerda began to doubt it herself. "I will put on my new red shoes," she said one morning, "those that Kay has never seen, and then I will go down to the river and ask for him." It was quite early when she kissed her old grandmother, who was still asleep. Then she put on her red shoes and went quite alone out of the town gates toward the river. "Is it true that you have taken my little playmate away from me?" she said to the river. "I will give you my red shoes if you will give him back to me." And it seemed as if the waves nodded to her in a strange manner. Then she took off her red shoes, which she liked better than anything else, and threw them both into the river. But they fell near the bank, and the little waves carried them back to land, just as if the river would not take from her what she loved best, because they could not give her back little Kay. But she thought the shoes had not been thrown out far enough. Then she crept into a boat that lay among the reeds, and threw the shoes again from the farther end of the boat into the water. But it was not fastened, and her movement sent it gliding away from the land. When she saw this, she hastened to reach the end of the boat, but before she could do so, it was more than a yard from the bank, and drifting away faster than ever. Then little Gerda was very much frightened, and began to cry, but no one heard her except the sparrows, and they could not carry her to land, but they flew along by the shore and sang as if to comfort her. "Here we are! Here we are!" The boat floated with the stream. Little Gerda sat quite still with only her stockings on her feet. The red shoes floated after her, but she could not reach them because the boat kept so much in advance. The banks on each side of the river were very pretty. There were beautiful flowers, old trees, sloping fields in which cows and sheep were grazing, but not a man to be seen. "Perhaps the river will carry me to little Kay," thought Gerda, and then she became more cheerful, and raised her head and looked at the beautiful green banks, and so the boat sailed on for hours. At length she came to a large cherry orchard, in which stood a small red house with strange red and blue windows. It had also a thatched roof, and outside were 2 wooden soldiers that presented arms to her as she sailed past. Gerda called out to them, for she thought they were alive, but of course they did not answer. As the boat drifted nearer to the shore, she saw what they really were. Then Gerda called still louder, and then came a very old woman out of the house, leaning on a crutch. She wore a large hat to shade her from the sun, and on it were painted all sorts of pretty flowers. "You poor little girl," said the old woman. "How did you manage to come all this distance into the wide world on such a rapid rolling stream?" And then the old woman walked in the water, seized the boat with her crutch, and drew it to land, and lifted Gerda out. And Gerda was glad to feel herself on dry ground, although she was rather afraid of the strange old woman. "Come and tell me who you are," she said, "and how came you here?" Then Gerda told her everything, while the old woman shook her head and said, "H'm, h'm." And when she finished, Gerda asked if she had not seen little Kay, and the old woman told her he had not passed by that way, but he very likely would come. So she told Gerda not to be sorrowful, but to taste the cherries and look at the flowers. They were better than any picture book, for each of them could tell a story. Then she took Gerda by the hand and led her into the little house, and the old woman closed the door. The windows were very high, and as the panes were red, blue, and yellow, the daylight shone through them in all sorts of singular colours. On the table stood beautiful cherries, and Gerda had permission to eat as many as she would. While she was eating them, the old woman combed out her long flaxen ringlets with a golden comb, and the glossy curls hung down on each side of the little round pleasant face, which looked fresh and blooming as a rose. "I have long been wishing for a dear little maiden like you," said the old woman, "and now you must stay with me and see how happily we shall live together." And while she went on combing little Gerda's hair, she thought less and less about her adopted brother Kay, for the old woman could conjure. Although she was not a wicked witch, she conjured only a little for her own amusement, and now because she wanted to keep Gerda. Therefore she went into the garden and stretched out her crutch towards all the rose trees, beautiful though they were, and they immediately sunk into the dark earth, so that no one could tell where they had once stood. The old woman was afraid that if little Gerda saw roses, she would think about those at home, and then remember little Kay and run away. Then she took Gerda into the flower garden. How fragrant and beautiful it was! Every flower that could be thought of for every season of the year was here in full bloom. No picture book could have more beautiful colours. Gerda jumped for joy and played till the sun went down behind the tall cherry trees. Then she slept in an elegant bed with red silk pillows, embroidered with coloured violets, and then she dreamed as pleasantly as a queen on her wedding day. The next day, and for many days after, Gerda played with the flowers in the warm sunshine. She knew every flower, and yet, although there were so many of them, it seemed as if one were missing. But which it was she could not tell. One day, however, as she sat looking at the old woman's hat with the painted flowers on it, she saw the prettiest of them all was a rose. The old woman had forgotten to take it from her hat when she made all the roses sink into the earth. But it is difficult to keep the thoughts together in everything. One little mistake upsets all our arrangements. "What? Are there no roses here?" cried little Gerda, and she ran out into the garden and examined all the beds, and searched and searched. There was not one to be found. Then she sat down and wept, and her tears fell just on the place where one of the rose trees had sunk down. The warm tears moistened the earth, and the rose tree sprouted up at once, as blooming as when it had sunk, and Gerda embraced it and kissed the roses, and thought of the beautiful roses at home, and with them of little Kay. "Oh, how I have been detained!" said the little maiden. "I wanted to seek for little Kay. Do you know where he is?" she asked the roses. "Do you think he is dead?" And the roses answered, "No, he is not dead. We have been in the ground where all the dead lie, but Kay is not there." Thank you, said little Gerda, and then she went to the other flowers and looked into their little cups and asked, Do you know where little Kay is? But each flower, as it stood in the sunshine, dreamed only of its own little fairy tale of history. Not one knew anything of Kay. Gerda heard many stories from the flowers as she asked them one after another about him. And what? Said the tiger lily. Hark! Do you hear the drum? Turn, turn! There are only 2 notes, always turn, turn. Listen to the woman's song of mourning. Hear the cry of the priest. In her long red robe stands the Hindu widow by the funeral pile. The flames rise around her as she places herself on the dead body of her husband. But the Hindu woman is thinking of the living one in that circle, of him, her son, who lighted those flames. Those shining eyes trouble her heart more painfully than the flames which will soon consume her body to ashes. Can the fire of the heart be extinguished in the flames of the funeral pile? I don't understand that at all, said little Gerda. That is my story, said the tiger lily. What says the convolvulus? Near yonder narrow road lies an old knight's castle. Thick ivy creeps over the old ruined walls, leaf over leaf, even to the balcony in which stands a beautiful maiden. She bends over the balustrades and looks up the road. No rose on its stem is fresher than she. No apple blossom, wafted by the wind, floats more lightly than she moves. Her rich silk rustles as she bends over and exclaims, Will he not come? Is it Kay you mean? Asked Gerda. I am only speaking of a story of my dream, replied the flower. What? Said the little snowdrop. Between 2 trees a rope is hanging. There is a piece of board upon it. It is a swing. 2 pretty little girls, in dresses white as snow, and with long green ribbons fluttering from their hats, are sitting upon it swinging. Their brother, who is taller than they are, stands in the swing. He has one arm round the rope to steady himself. In one hand he holds a little bowl, and in the other a clay pipe. He is blowing bubbles. As the swing goes on, the bubbles fly upward, reflecting the most beautiful varying colours. The last still hangs from the bowl of the pipe and sways in the wind. On goes the swing, and then a little black dog comes running up. He's almost as light as the bubble, and he raises himself on his hind legs and wants to be taken into the swing, but it does not stop, and the dog falls. Then he barks and gets angry. The children stoop towards him, and the bubble bursts. A swinging plank, a light, sparkling foam picture. That's my story. It may be all very pretty, what you are telling me, said little Gerda, but you speak so mournfully, and you do not mention little Kay at all. What do the hyacinths say? There are 3 beautiful sisters, fair and delicate. The dress of one was red, of the second blue, and of the third pure white. Hand in hand they danced in the bright moonlight by the calm lake, but they were human beings, not fairy elves. The sweet fragrance attracted them, and they disappeared in the wood. Here the fragrance became stronger. 3 coffins, in which lay the 3 beautiful maidens, glided from the thickest part of the forest across the lake. The fireflies flew lightly over them, like little floating torches. Do the dancing maidens sleep, or are they dead? The scent of the flowers says that they are corpses. The evening bell tolls their knell. Oh, you make me quite sorrowful, said little Gerda. Your perfume is so strong, you make me think of the dead maidens. Ah, is little Kay really dead then? The roses have been in the earth, and they say no. Cling, clang, tolled the hyacinth bells.
We are not tolling for little Kay. We do not know him. We sing our song, the only one we know." Then Gerda went to the buttercups that were glittering among the bright green leaves. "You are little bright suns," said Gerda. "Tell me if you know where I can find my playfellow." And the buttercups sparkled gaily and looked at Gerda. What song could the buttercups sing? It was not about Kay. The bright warm sun shone on a little court on the first warm day of spring. His bright beams rested on the white walls of the neighbouring house, and close by bloomed the first yellow of the season, glittering like gold in the sun's warm ray. An old woman sat in her armchair at the house door, and her granddaughter, a poor and pretty servant maid, came to see her for a short visit. When she kissed her grandmother, there was gold everywhere, the gold of the heart in that holy kiss. It was a golden morning. There was gold in the beaming sunlight, gold in the leaves of the lowly flower, and on the leaves of the maiden. "There, that is my story," said the buttercup. "My poor old grandmother," sighed Gerda. "She is longing to see me, and grieving for me as she did for little Kay. But I shall soon go home now, and take little Kay with me. It's no use asking the flowers. They know only their own songs, and can give me no information." And then she tucked up her little dress, that she might run faster. But the narcissus caught her by the leg as she was jumping over it. So she stopped and looked at the tall yellow flower, and said, "Perhaps you may know something?" Then she stooped down quite close to the flower and listened. And what did it say? "I can see myself, I can see myself," said the narcissus. "Oh, how sweet is my perfume! Up in a little room with a bow window stands a little dancing girl, half undressed. She stands sometimes on one leg and sometimes on both, and looks as if she would tread the whole world under her feet. She's nothing but a delusion. She is pouring water out of a teapot on a piece of stuff which she holds in her hand. It is her bodice. Cleanliness is a good thing, she says. Her white dress hangs on a peg. It has also been washed in the teapot and dried on the roof. She puts it on and ties a saffron-coloured handkerchief round her neck, which makes the dress look whiter. See how she stretches out her leg as if she were showing off on a stem. I can see myself, I can see myself." "What do I care for all that?" said Gerda. "You need not tell me such stuff." And then she ran to the other end of the garden. The door was fastened, but she pressed against the rusty latch, and it gave way. The door sprang open, and little Gerda ran out with bare feet into the wide world. She looked back 3 times, but no one seemed to be following her. At last she could run no longer, so she sat down to rest on a great stone, and when she looked around she saw that the summer was over, and autumn very far advanced. She had known nothing of this in the beautiful garden, where the sun shone and the flowers grew all the year round. "Oh, how I have wasted my time!" said little Gerda. "It is autumn. I must not rest any longer," and she rose up to go on. But her little feet were wounded and sore, and everything around her looked so cold and bleak. The long willow leaves were quite yellow. The dewdrops fell like water. Leaf after leaf dropped from the tree. The sloe-thorn alone still bore fruit, but the sloes were sour and set the teeth on edge. Oh, how dark and weary the whole world appeared. End of Story 3. Story 4. The Prince and Princess. Gerda was obliged to rest again, and just opposite the place where she sat, she saw a great crow come hopping across the snow toward her. He stood looking at her for some time, and then he wagged his head and said, "Caw, caw, good day, good day." He pronounced the words as plainly as he could, because he meant to be kind to the little girl. And then he asked her where she was going all alone in the wide world. The word alone Gerda understood very well, and knew how much it expressed. So then she told the Crow the whole story of her life and adventures, and asked him if he had seen little Kay. The Crow nodded his head very gravely, and said, "Perhaps I have. It may be." "No, do you think you have?" cried the little Gerda, and she kissed the Crow and hugged him almost to death with joy. "Gently, gently," said the Crow. "I believe I know. I think it may be little Kay, but he has certainly forgotten you by this time for the princess." "Does he live with a princess?" asked Gerda. "Yes, listen," replied the Crow. "But it is so difficult to speak your language. If you understand the Crow's language, then I can explain it better." Footnote: Children have a kind of a language, or gibberish, which is sometimes called Crow's language. It is formed by adding letters or syllables to every word. End of footnote. "Do you?" "No, I have never learned it," said Gerda, "but my grandmother understands it and used to speak it to me. I wish I had learned it." "Does not matter," answered the Crow. "I will explain as well as I can, although it will be very badly done." And he told her what he had heard. "In this kingdom where we are now," he said, "there lives a princess who is so wonderfully clever that she has read all the newspapers in the world, and forgotten them too, although she is so clever. A short time ago, as she was sitting on her throne, which people say is not such an agreeable seat as is often supposed, she began to sing a song which commences in these words, 'Why should I not be married?'" "Why not indeed?" said she, and so she determined to marry if she could find a husband who knew what to say when he was spoken to, and not one who could look only grand, for that was so tiresome. Then she assembled all her court ladies together at the beat of the drum, and when they heard of her intentions, they were very much pleased. "We are so glad to hear it," said they. "We were talking about it ourselves the other day." "You may believe that every word I tell you is true," said the Crow, "for I have a tame sweetheart who goes freely about the palace, and she told me all of this." Of course his sweetheart was a crow, for birds of a feather flock together, and one crow always chooses another crow. Newspapers were published immediately with a border of hearts, and the initials of the princess among them. They gave notice that every young man who was handsome was free to visit the castle and speak with the princess, and those who could reply loud enough to be heard when spoken to were to make themselves quite at home at the palace, but the one who spoke best would be chosen as a husband for the princess. "Yes, yes, you may believe me, it is all as true as I sit here," said the Crow. The people came in crowds. There was a great deal of crushing and running about, but no one succeeded either on the first or second day. They could all speak very well while they were outside in the streets, but when they entered the palace gates and saw the guards in silver uniforms, and the footmen in their golden livery on the staircase, and the great halls lighted up, they became quite confused. And when they stood before the throne on which the princess sat, they could do nothing but repeat the last words she had said, and she had no particular wish to hear her own words over again. It was just as if they had all taken something to make them sleepy while they were in the palace, for they did not recover themselves nor speak till they got back again into the street. There was quite a long line of them reaching from the town gate to the palace. I went myself to see them," said the Crow. "They were hungry and thirsty,
for at the palace they could not get even a glass of water. Some of the wisest had taken a few slices of bread and butter with them, but they did not share it with their neighbours. They thought if they went in to the princess looking hungry, there would be a better chance for themselves. "But Kay, tell me about little Kay," said Gerda. "Was he amongst the crowd?" "Stop a bit, we're just coming to him. It was on the third day there came marching cheerfully along to the palace a little personage without horses or carriage, his eyes sparkling like yours. He had beautiful long hair, but his clothes were very poor." "That was Kay," said Gerda joyfully. "Oh, then I have found him," and she clapped her hands. "He had a little knapsack on his back," added the Crow. "No, it must have been his sledge," said Gerda, "for he went away with it." "It may have been so," said the Crow. "I did not look at it very closely, but I know from my tame sweetheart that he passed through the palace gates, saw the guards in their silver uniform, and the servants in their liveries of gold on the stairs, but he was not in the least embarrassed." "It must be very tiresome to stand on stairs," he said. "I prefer to go in." The rooms were blazing with light. Councillors and ambassadors walked about with bare feet, carrying golden vessels. It was enough to make anyone feel serious. His boots creaked loudly as he walked, and yet he was not at all uneasy. "It must be Kay," said Gerda. "I know he had new boots on. I have heard them creak in the grandmother's room." "They really did creak," said the Crow. Yet he went boldly up to the princess herself, who was sitting on a pearl as large as a spinning wheel, and all the ladies of the court were present with their maids, and all the cavaliers with their servants, and each of the maids had another maid to wait upon her, and the cavaliers' servants had their own servants, as well as a page each. They all stood in circles round the princess, and the nearer they stood to the door, the prouder they looked. The servants' pages, who always wore slippers, could hardly be looked at. They held themselves up so proudly by the door.
"Oh, it must be quite awful," said little Gerda. "But did Kay win the princess?"
"If I had not been a crow," said he, "I would have married her myself, although I am engaged. He spoke just as well as I do when I speak the crow's language, so I heard from my tame sweetheart. He was quite free and agreeable, and said he had not come to woo the princess, but to hear her wisdom, as he was as pleased with her as she was with him."
"Oh, certainly that was Kay," said Gerda. "He was so clever. He could work mental arithmetic and fractions. Oh, will you take me to the palace?"
"It's very easy to ask that," replied the Crow. "But how are we to manage it? However, I will speak about it to my tame sweetheart and ask her advice. For I must tell you it will be very difficult to gain permission for a little girl like you to enter the palace."
"Oh, yes, but I shall gain permission easily," said Gerda, "for when Kay hears that I am here, he will come out and fetch me in immediately."
"Wait for me here by the palings," said the Crow,
wagging his head as he flew away. It was late in the evening before the Crow returned.
"Caw, caw," he said.
"She sends you greeting, and here is a little roll which she took from the kitchen for you. There is plenty of bread there, and she thinks you must be hungry. It's not possible for you to enter the palace by the front entrance. The guards in silver uniform
and the servants in gold livery would not allow it. But do not cry. We will manage to get you in. My sweetheart knows a little back staircase which leads to the sleeping apartments, and she knows where to find the key."
Then they went into the garden, through the great avenue, where the leaves were falling one after the other, and they could see the light in the palace being put out in the same manner. And the Crow led little Gerda to the back door, which stood ajar. Oh, how little Gerda's heart beat with anxiety and longing! It was just as if she were going to do something wrong, and yet she only wanted to know where little Kay was. "It must be he," she thought, "with those clear eyes and that long hair." She could fancy she saw him smiling at her as he used to at home, when they sat among the roses. He would certainly be glad to see her, and to hear what a long distance she had come for his sake, and to know how sorry they had been at home because he did not come back. Oh, what joy and yet fear she felt! They were now on the stairs, and in a little closet at the top a lamp was burning. In the middle of the floor stood the tame Crow, turning her head from side to side and gazing at Gerda, who curtsied as her grandmother had taught her to do. "My betrothed has spoken very highly of you, my little lady," said the tame Crow. "Your life history, vita as it may be called, is very touching. If you will take the lamp, I will walk before you. We will go straight along this way, then we shall meet no one." "It seems to me as if somebody were behind us," said Gerda, as something rushed by her like a shadow on the wall, and then horses with flying manes and thin legs, hunters, ladies and gentlemen on horseback, glided by her like shadows on the wall. "They are only dreams," said the Crow. "They are coming to fetch the thoughts of the great people out hunting. All the better, for we shall be able to look at them in their beds more safely. I hope that when you rise to honour and favour, you will show a grateful heart." "You may be quite sure of that," said the Crow from the forest. They now came into the first hall, the walls of which were hung with rose-coloured satin, embroidered with artificial flowers. Here the dreams again flitted by them, but so quickly that Gerda could not distinguish the royal persons. Each hall appeared more splendid than the last. It was enough to bewilder anyone. At length they reached a bedroom. The ceiling was like a great palm tree, with glass leaves of the most costly crystal, and over the centre of the floor 2 beds, each resembling a lily, hung from a stem of gold. One on which the princess lay was white, the other was red, and in this Gerda had to seek for little Kay. She pushed one of the red leaves aside and saw a little brown neck. Oh, that must be Kay! She called his name out quite loud, and then held the lamp over him. The dreams rushed back into the room on horseback. He woke and turned his head around. It was not little Kay. The prince was only like him in the neck. Still, he was young and pretty. Then the princess peeped out of her white lily bed and asked what was the matter. Then little Gerda wept and told her story, and all that the Crows had done to help her. "You poor child," said the prince and princess. Then they praised the Crows, and said that they were not angry for what they had done, but that it must not happen again, and this time they should be rewarded. "Would you like to have your freedom?" asked the princess. "Or would you prefer to be raised to the position of court crows, with all that is left in the kitchen for yourselves?" Then both the Crows bowed and begged to have a fixed appointment, for they thought of their old age, and said it would be so comfortable to feel that they had provision for their old days, as they called it. And then the prince got out of his bed and gave it up to Gerda. He could do no more, and she lay down. She folded her little hands and thought, "How good everyone is to me, men and animals too." Then she closed her eyes and fell into a sweet sleep. All the dreams came flying back again to her, and they looked like angels, and one of them drew a little sledge on which sat Kay and nodded to her. But all this was only a dream, and vanished as soon as she awoke. The following day she was dressed from head to foot in silk and velvet, and they invited her to stay at the palace for a few days and enjoy herself. But she only begged for a pair of boots and a little carriage and a horse to draw it, so that she might go into the wide world to seek for Kay. And she obtained not only boots, but also a muff, and she was neatly dressed, and when she was ready to go, there at the door she found a coach made of pure gold, with the coat of arms of the prince and princess shining upon it like a star, and the coachman, footman, and outriders all wearing gold crowns on their heads. The prince and princess themselves helped her into the coach and wished her success. The forest crow, who was now married, accompanied her for the first 3 miles. He sat by Gerda's side, as he could not bear riding backwards. The tame crow stood in the doorway flapping her wings. She could not go with them, because she had been suffering from headache ever since the new appointment, no doubt from eating too much. The coach was well stored with sweet cakes, and under the seat were fruit and gingerbread nuts. "Farewell, farewell!" cried the prince and princess, and little Gerda wept, and the crow wept, and then after a few miles the crow also said, "Farewell," and this was the saddest parting. However, he flew to a tree and stood flapping his black wings as long as he could see the coach, which glittered in the bright sunshine. End of The Snow Queen, Part 2.